Hello again, this is Bob Buckley with True 32 Corporation, and this is another in the series of video tutorials for the True 32 library for KCD. This one will be titled Best Practices, and this is just for layout and proper order of doing things. So the first thing I want to go over is to always start with a quick start job, which we've had several tutorials dealing with quick start jobs, but that's the best way to get your startup standards here. These shop standards, there's basically just one set of shop standards within KCD, and so my defaults here are basically for 10-foot walls in the cabinet positions that I would normally do for 10-foot walls. But what if I have an 8-foot wall height or a 9-foot wall height? I've got to come in and adjust these, and there's no reason to do that each and every time you do a job that doesn't have 10-foot walls. You can certainly create these quick start jobs or utilize the ones I've created to solve that problem. So we'll come in here and say we want to open a job. They're always at the top of the list. If you don't use numbering schemes for your job names, all my job names are going to be below it because they're alpha, and all of my quick start jobs are numeric. So as long as you don't start your job names with any numeric numbers, then they'll be at the top of the list. So I'm going to take this 8-foot ceiling to ceiling, and that just means that we have an 8-foot ceiling and the cabinets are going to go to the ceiling, and say OK. And if this was a job I was actually working on, I would immediately come in here and do a save as. And we're just going to call this our test job and save. And there's already one. I always have one or two of those sitting in there. And so we've started with our quick start. We have, when we come here and set our shop standards, we see that we have a wall height of 2440, the position, all of the different items as far as freeze. Again, this particular job is going to ceiling, so there is no freeze, but our crown mold is overlapping that by 28 millimeters because of the size of the crown, probably a 3 1/4, 3.5 inch crown. And when we come down and look at our line 74, which is our top reveal, we see that it's set to 67. So all those things are already filled in for us, which is very helpful to start with that. The next thing we would do after we name the job, and my job names typically are, when we look at these jobs that are in here, they typically start with the builder's company name and then the homeowner's name, and then there's some suffixes for different things like revisions. Inch is just when I've created a set of drawings specific to the homeowner. So these were the drawings I created in metric, and then when I got ready to convert it to inches, I saved as first to inch so that I wouldn't have any danger of going back and forth and losing some accuracy in the conversion from metric to inch and back to metric. So this is a disposable job, and every so often I come in and purge all these jobs with the inch suffix. But if I have multiple revisions, I also add REV 1, 2, 3, and if we scroll down, we'll see some of those. And ultimately, whatever the last one, revision 1, is, if we only made one revision, then that becomes the last one. If I made 2, then 2, and I delete everything but that. But my job names are almost always like this is direct buy, and then their display cabinet or the Handelman project, and then sometimes I include the room if I think I need to, but most of the time it's just the job name, and if I'm going to break it into multiples, then I do use the room as the indicator of which portion of the job it is. So job names are important. The next thing I would do is draw my walls, and I want to illustrate to you the proper way to draw walls first, which would be always working clockwise. So I'm just going to make up these wall lengths. It doesn't matter what they are. Alright, so we've got a little U-shaped kitchen here, and just for the matter of having something in here, I'm going to throw in on this wall, I'm going to throw in a 45-degree base cabinet left, and over here on the right I'm going to throw a pie cut corner right, or yeah, I'll use a pie cut one piece right, and then we'll look straight on at that wall, and we'll say we've got base drawer over door 1372 divided by 2, and you want it to set at 914. Just want to fill this in a little bit so I can, and then I'm going to say right of and copy. I'm going to fill it in a little bit so I can show you the navigation, and then we'll say 3 drawer stack. That is 16, or we'll say 762, just fill in one more space. And the right to right is 914, or I could say left of 1. And then we'll pop over here to this wall, do a 4 drawer stack. Say that's 762, and it's at 914. And say OK. The navigation that you would use to go from wall to wall is here. This is telling us that we're in room 1 of 2 and that we're on wall 3. If we click the primary mouse button, we go forward a wall. So now we're on wall 1. If we click it again, we're on wall 2. If we click it again, we're on wall 3. If we use the secondary mouse button, then we back up. So that if we draw those walls, and you can see the highlighting here, if we draw the walls, now I'm going to click my secondary button, back up a wall, or I can click my primary button and go forward a wall. That navigation works best if you draw your entire room clockwise, so that when you click your primary mouse button, you go from wall 1 to wall 2 to wall 3, and you can rotate around the room. If you don't, then you get totally different results. But if you have corner cabinets, it's nice to be able to see, just rotate around this room and see how they interrelate to each other, not be skipping all over the place. So let's ditch these cabinets. I'm going to use my right button functionality here and erase all highlighted units. And then actually what I want to do is get rid of these walls too. So let's just get these walls out of here real quick. And we'll draw some walls. Let's say we started with our primary wall, just not really thinking about how we were going to go about this. And then we add this wall over here. And then we add this wall over here. And I see this a lot on other people's drawings. It doesn't seem like a big deal. I even see it on some of the drawings that are illustrations for some of the tutorials in the KCD website. It's not a big deal, but if we add that same type of cabinet layout here, or something similar anyway, let's say we add to this wall, we add a pie cut 2-piece over on the left, and then we add a base 45 corner right on the right. Again, we fill in this center section with something. 272 divided by 2 at 914. Right, copy. Come around the second wall. We'll say 3 drawer stack is 762 and right of 2. There. And then we'll do a 4 drawer stack, and we'll say that that is 762, and right to right is 914. Alright, so now we're on wall 2. If we use our primary button to say we want to go to the next wall, we don't go to the next wall. We go from wall 2 to wall 3. We do numerically, but if we were looking at this, and we're on wall 1, then we're on wall 2, and then we're on wall 3, but they're not in the order that we drew them. So it doesn't make a lot of sense of trying to determine how your corners are interrelating to each other to go in that order. And the more walls you have, the more confusing that can be. So if I'm looking at it overhead and the wall that I'm on is gray, you see here when I'm clicking on the secondary button, I'm going from 1, 3, and now when I'm overhead it does actually go in the right order, but that's not helpful, or backwards. So, but it does not, if I just click on my primary button, I'm going from 1, 2 to 3, which are not in order. So if you draw it clockwise, it's just going to make a whole lot more sense as you navigate from wall to wall using this gray bar as your navigation, and that's the easiest way I know of. Now, one thing that some people aren't aware of is if at any point in time, up to 9 walls, you can go to any of those walls by just typing that number. So right now we're on wall 3. If I type 1, we go to wall 1. If I type 3, we go to wall 3. If I type 2, we go to wall 2. Once you get over 10, then all bets are off. As for everything past 10, you can't type it in and go to it. So that might help some of you to get somewhere very quickly. Once I get my walls drawn, even before I add the cabinets, the first thing that I do from that point is come in here to change and go to, I go to view and rooms and rename this room. This is the only room, the first room is the only room it doesn't ask you for a room name. So it requires you to come in here and basically enter that room name. Now if I say I want to add another room, I already have an empty room in this particular job that doesn't have a name. So now I want to add a room. Now apparently I've got to add something to this. Add a wall to this one, and now say I want to add a room. And this one already has a name, so when I come in here and say I want to add another room, it asks me and prompts me. As you add that second room, it always asks you for the room name, but when you add the first room, it does not. So I always want to name my first room as early as possible. Not too early, it'll actually lose the name if you do it before you draw walls. If you go add the room name and then draw the walls, one of the time when you save in the future, it actually will lose it. But if you draw your walls first and then add your room name, it will keep it. The next thing I do, typically now, I've kind of changed my process on this, but I like to fill in this header info. I always use this first line to have the job name, and then the second line will always have my door information. The third line will have my profiles for those doors, framing profile, panel profile, edge profile. The fourth line always has my finish for the project, and my fifth line always has the hardware selection for my job. And if you need to be room specific, then you can use this room heading to do that. But that information now, since we have with the business partner pages that we add to our drawings for our clients, and that could still change, I don't want to have to edit it in 2 places. So I don't actually add that information now until I'm engineering, until I get to the point where I'm ready to make a cut list, because all that information in the header is not for the homeowner. Everything they need to know is on the pages we include with the business partner, and they don't need to be redundant, and then I also don't want them to conflict where I've remembered to change them in the business partner but not in KCD or vice versa. So just don't put the header information in until I'm ready to go to engineering, but then I do always add that header information so that my guys don't have to flip back 3 pages or forward to 5 pages to find what an edge band, the edge band color is, or the finish color is, something like that. It's actually listed on each and every page. Especially helpful in the hardware department when we're actually putting knobs and pulls, all that on, or what drawer system, and all of those things. So that is important to add that header information. There's also a new feature. If you come into, actually it's in Change, Edit System, this last item here, Edit Company Heading, gives you the ability to come in and create a custom heading where you can actually add your, let me see here, heading. I've actually created one just as a test. Let's change. Use a custom heading and edit that. And you can see I've added my logo up here, and I've actually added a text field here, and you could create this text field with all those answers already in it, and maybe have multiples, but for me there's so many options. I just like to have this starting point, and then I could come in here and edit it for this job and then save that. And that really, these are variables if they have a pound sign in front of them. So this is going to use the information you've entered into that company information. So this would have my company name and address and fax number and phone number and all that. But over here, this is a custom text item. I used this text file and added a custom text file where I can come in here and type in these items, the answers to these items. These are my prompts to what goes there, and add the appropriate information. And then, like I say, you can add your logo, and it'll actually use this information to print out your heading if you've selected that. If you've come in here and selected, in this case I've named this T32 heading, and say OK. If I come in here and go to my print options, now I didn't fill in all that information, but if I had, then I would actually have that True 32 heading instead with my logo up here, and then had I filled in all this information, that would be there too. And you can set the font size and all of that. So that's really helpful. It's a new feature to version 9, and I am enjoying that. Another thing that I like to always remember to do before I actually go to order my doors, sometime fairly early in this design process, once I've got all the cabinets where I want them, and you can see here they're not in any order, 6, 1, 3, 4, because I always like to try to remember, and I typically just do this fairly frequently throughout the design process of coming here and saying I want to renumber all units, and then it just kind of keeps them in a. Now again, I've got these walls out of order, so it didn't do, it's starting with 5, but if I had my job where I had this is wall 1, this is wall 2, and this is wall 3, then cabinet 1 would be here, 2, 3, 4, it would go from smallest to largest. But because I numbered these out of order, not in a clockwise, or in counterclockwise works too, it's just not as intuitive when you're navigating here to do that. So I do renumber often. And then another thing to remember is save often. Once you've saved that job with a name, in this case we did test, then you just come up here and hit save. You don't have to do anything else, and it just saves those changes you made, and that's another good best practice to be in, is I'll save often. So I hope that is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you on another video soon. Thanks.